Hey, Derek Hugel with Wolf Industries, Inc., looking to continue site feasibility in this fourth episode of construction and details on developing. We've got soils and wetlands to cover, setbacks, easements, trees, parking, circulation, ADA requirements, and a whole bunch of nonsense to go with it as well, so let's get started. So when we're wanting to develop a piece of property, we are going to be looking at this from two different perspectives. You've got inside the urban growth boundary, as depicted by these dark shades of tan on this county mapping service. For us, it's Clark County, and we use GIS. You'll find that in your jurisdiction as well. Each one that I've found uses a different mapping software, but look into your guys' local jurisdiction and find out that software that they use. Sometimes you got to reach out to the GIS office or do some digging to find it online. But today we've got urban growth boundaries. We've got the city of Vancouver. We've got city of Camas, city of Washougal, city of Battleground, Ridgefield, and so forth. But you'll see this area that's shaded a little bit darker. That depicts the urban growth boundary. I'm going to be focusing my time on the areas inside the urban growth boundary. The cities and county are doing a comprehensive code update where they have to plan for the next 20 years up to 2045. And they have not been increasing this urban growth boundary. See, Clark County is held by the standards of the state to the Growth Management Act. And the GMA mandates that you have a certain ratio between the urban and the rural zones, and they want to make sure they don't have urban sprawl. And in so doing, they are increasing the density inside these urban zones and wanting to go denser and deeper and taller and so forth. I'm on the State Building Code Council, and we are tasked with developing a sixplex to be able to put on any single family residence inside the urban growth boundary. So that's exciting. That's coming in 2026. And so we want to make sure that when we're finding a piece of property that it is properly set up, because you can find property all the time, but again, all these pitfalls I mentioned earlier will set you back and cause all kinds of problems. So let's get started. Soils and critical areas. Let's just turn on the layer of zoning. And we're going to turn this on. Zoning overlay. Turn on zoning. It's loading. It takes a little bit of time for these maps to really update. And there we go. So let's assume residential. And we're going to come over here and look for single family residence, residential. Now we have to remember that we have city codes, county codes, and they can overlap. So you see this dark line that, remember, for the city of Vancouver. Let's stay outside of that and let's stay in the county. And if we look at single family residential R17, someone that, let's pick something in this neighborhood just for example's sake. We got a school. Let's turn this zoning off for a second and turn on aerial imagery so we can at least try and find a parcel of land that's a little bit bigger. All right, this is land. And that's all one piece. So it looks like a church. Let's find this piece. And we got to turn on our eye so the tax lot actually populates. So Pat Hart owns this. I don't know who he is, but let's say we're wanting to develop this property and we're going to make an offer on it. We got to find out what it's worth and what we can and can't do. So step one is soils and critical areas. We've talked about a lot of the other things, and check out those videos for sure on other tasks to be watching out for. But let's go to the Development Review tab and open up Environmental. And we're going to be spending some time in here. Soils and wetlands, water features, riparian habitat. And let's turn on slopes. That's another one. Making sure that you don't have any steep slopes that you can't build. Pinecrest Golf Course. Look at that. But let's say they're going to change the, we actually know the zone. It's zoned light and zoned for residential. So we know the zoning. And the way we know that, and we can confirm, is if we click this Property Information Center, we can scroll down here. We know it's Clark County jurisdiction, zoning designation codes, single family residential R16 and R17.5. Look at that. There are two different zones on one parcel. Should we find out where those are? Well, that would be if we go back to our zoning. Oh, it's under planning. Here we go. Turn on zoning. Sure enough, you got two different zones. You got this denser, darker yellow, and you got the lighter yellow. So you got two different zones and two different densities on the same piece of property. And that happens. Sometimes you got these houses or these planned units going in this area need to be at a different density than the units planned for this area. Let's turn zoning back off and go back to soils and critical areas. So soils are important because anytime we're planning development in the state of Washington, we have to plan for the stormwater to go back into the ground at the rate that it was as if it had been forested 100 years ago. That's the premise of the Washington Stormwater Manual. And so we need to know what kind of soil type we have. Well, the county has just that. They have soils. Now, I'm not an expert, but you have all of the different classifications. And if I turn on I and I click HOG or HOC, that's going to tell me the drainage class. The better drained soil we have, the smaller stormwater facility we'll need. So you've been around and you've seen those stormwater ponds around town. Those are taking up precious real estate. So if you have poorly drained soil, you need a larger pond. If you have well-drained soil, that means you can have a smaller pond in general. Okay, let's look at what HOG is. That is also well-drained. Hillsborough silt loam, 30 to 65% slopes. Ooh, means we got some slopes going on here, which we will talk about in a second. Let's go back to layers, turn on percent slope, and look at what we got going on. If we open up the legend, we can see that we've got some steep slopes through here and more flat over here. Green meaning less slope, yellow, orange is warning, darker orange is like, hey, pay attention here, we got some steep slopes. Another tool you can use is Google Earth, and that's interesting perspective to use as well, using the 3D fly around. Critical areas, turn off soil type. Let's go to critical riparian habitat. Turn on these and check out to see what kind of potential hazard we might have. So we have Salmon Creek Greenway right here. And we've got some buffer from Salmon Creek Greenway. I like to take a tape measure and just see the distance that they're showing. That's 216 feet, which is about right in the county. There is a buffer of 200 feet from the 100-year ordinary high water mark. So you're going to have those setbacks. So as you can see real quickly, we thought we had X square footage, but now you are losing a bunch. Let's see what that is. So loosely speaking, we have 17 acres. But if we go back to our property information, we had 19.5. So we're shrinking what's eligible to be used for development. Okay, another critical area that we need to pay attention to is wetlands. And if we come down here and turn on potential wetland presence, it's going to, again, loading up in the top right. Here we got them turned on. There we go. We've got a wetland potential of this green spot. Let's assume that the biologist goes out there and determines there is wetlands in these areas. We will have a 200-foot buffer from that edge, depending on the classification of wetlands. For the most intense buffer, it's 200 feet. If you've got different classes of wetlands, it reduces sometimes down to 150 or 100 or sometimes even 75. But you've got, those are the rare instances. You're doing some wetland buffering where you're trading off and giving more area in one spot in exchange for putting some housing closer to wetlands in another. So if we're back to our calculation, we're actually losing more property because it's going to be in this region, 200 feet away from the green. Another critical area that we need to pay attention to is severe erosion hazard. So we'll turn that layer on and see what that shows. Turn off potential wetlands. As you can see, if this is severe erosion and the geotech is saying, those are non-buildable areas, we can see real quick why this is slated for a golf course, and that is the highest and best use for the time being. Where's our area? We went from 19.5 acres, measure area. Let's look at this. Oh, this is going to be a little bit interesting. I'm just going to do some averaging here. Oh, we got to stay away from the wetlands. 200 feet away from the potential wetlands, so we got to keep that buffer. Come up here, here, and here. Double click. Okay, now we're at 11 acres of buildable area, where we start off with 19.5. Again, shrink, 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 shrink. So setbacks is the next thing we need to talk about. And that comes from the base zone of what we're dealing with. So go back to the property info. We got R16. Let's use that code designation. Go to the Title 40.220 where it refers to the residential uses. Scroll down and come to our table where it talks about setbacks, lot coverage, and building height. You can always go jurisdiction, city, county, etc., zoning code, and then hit enter, and you'll be able to pull up your local jurisdiction's code to find it. This Clark County has a pretty nice link, and it brings you straight to it just under this hyperlink. So if we go here, we're looking at R16, we said, setbacks, front, side, interior, rear, it's all spelled out right here. 10 foot, 10 foot, 5 foot, 10 foot, and then you got your lot coverage over here. But we're just focusing on setbacks. It's telling us 10 feet. There is a footnote of 8. Let's read what that says. Front setbacks for garage fronts in these zones shall be minimum of 18 feet. Side and rear of the garage that have no driveway may be used for the 10-foot living space setback. There we go. We've got 10 foot. That's fairly normal. There's nothing excessive. I've seen some codes where there's a 20-foot rear setback. So when you're laying out how the buildings are going to go on there, you got to have some extra deep lots so you're not pinched too tight. But yeah, here we go. We've got setbacks of 10 feet and we're down to 11 acres of potential building sites. Next is easements. Let's turn on the easement layer. And this one's tricky because you might see encumbrances And I'm going to turn off severe erosion. We're going to turn off the soils and wetlands. Okay, so when we get to this step of easements, we're going to want to turn on encumbrances. And we can see right here that this parcel has an easement. And let's see if it'll tell us what it is. So it's an ingress egress easement. It doesn't say who it's with or who it's for. Sometimes you'll get some county records there, be able to look that up. But this is where a title company is your friend. Reach out to your local title company if you're looking at a piece of property and ask them, hey, what is the potential easements or encumbrances on this property? And they will, for a small fee, just pull up all the info that they have on file and get it to you. This one over here, ingress, egress. I suppose if we look at imagery, there might be some driveway for them to get to their house. Sure enough, looks like they have a driveway that comes right here through here to get to their house. And I mentioned it being tricky because not all encumbrances are shown on GIS. You might have something through here or here and it's not shown. So I've seen that very often. Make sure you get a title company to look through at things to get you a full and proper report. Next, I want to talk about trees. Each jurisdiction has a different code when it comes to trees. If you're looking at the City of Vancouver, they have a tree arborist on staff, and they will make you keep as many trees as you possibly can, to the point of making you plant a bunch of trees if you take trees down, or if the site has no trees to begin with, you still got to plant trees. So while they don't typically cause challenges, we did have a tree pose some problems and serious hiccups on a project over here in the image district where we put a bunch of cottages in. Let's see if we can get over there promptly enough. It's down in the City of Vancouver. We're getting hotter. Here it is. Oh, trying to do right here. So we had access coming in off the end of, oh, look at that. They updated the photos. That's cool. Anybody recognize that? That's Image District Cottages. So right here, we're coming off of 34th Street and coming through here. But there was a tree that's called a line tree because it was right on the line. And when that's the case, you have to negotiate and work and deal with the neighbor on that tree. It was right here on the corner. And the neighbor said, no way, you are not taking that tree down at all whatsoever. Over my dead body, they said, basically. Really? And it was a tricky deal where we had to use air spades and get in here to take out the roots, not take out the roots, and put air pads around the roots and build delicately on, over, and around the tree roots of this tree so we can access our property. So trees, while they're generally abundant and not a problem, sometimes they can become a very big problem. Next up, we want to talk about parking. So parking is a requirement by the jurisdictions, and it is getting less and less the closer we get to public services. But as a developer, you want to make sure you have enough parking to housing ratio to where you don't really cause problems down the road. You build too many houses, not enough parking, and you got major complaints. So when you're calculating density, you have to leave enough area for parking. We took an area and planned for parking right here along with Hammerhead, and we took up that much, roughly that much room for parking on this project. And then the rest of these were all houses, all centered around a common courtyard. Parking, sometimes you can off-street parking, which would be over here, and you can have some spots overflow, but don't plan on that too much. That's going to be problematic if you have minimum over here and all your tenants or people are parking way off and about and around the corner. A good ratio to have is, at minimum, in my opinion, 1-to-1. If you can get 1.5 or 2-to-1, that's doing really good, really good. That ratio is good for homes to parking spots, so it doesn't generally get too crazy. You get these single family residences and you can fit in 1, 2, 3, 4 cars, but when we're doing smaller cottage cluster developments, that 1 to 1.5 seems to work pretty well. Next up is circulation. You have to plan for the circulation of trash trucks, of emergency services, and so forth. So almost always we have to do a hammerhead turnaround or some sort of cul-de-sac or something that allows them to turn around. The only time you don't have to do that is when you are less than 150 feet from the property line. So while we're on the topic of circulation, there's another angle that the jurisdictions want to make sure they have covered. If you notice this entire block, there's no north-south road or circulation. You have to come way over here and around, and this is blocked off, or you come way over here to come around. So every about 1,000 feet, they're trying to get blocks built out so there is east, west, north, south circulation. You know, if you had to go around here or if you had to go around here, you have access. We have this site where the jurisdiction said there's no north-south circulation and you need to provide a road as part of your development for the north-south. Development needs to pay for itself, and therefore you want to develop this, you have to develop the road north-south. That is a huge cost, and most likely will put this project as non-feasible. So easement east-west and north-south on this one, and they want it built out. So really consider and pay attention to, they call it cross-block circulation. So the first place that you can go south is right here. They've got a jog in there. And then you come west, and the soonest that we're at 1,700 feet, and they're wanting it about every 1,200 feet. They want a block. So we're way over. And then you go even further west, assuming this gets developed and opened up. The next north-south is here, because this one is legacy lands and is never going to get developed, at least in my experience. They lock those lands down. And you're 1,200 feet to the west. So if you go from west to east, we have a distance of 3,000 feet. It's 2/3 of a mile, and there's no north-south. So they're putting their foot down saying you need to have circulation, build that out, expensive. The next thing to talk about is ADA. So ADA, for those that might be a little bit worried or concerned about it, it actually isn't that big of a deal. Your civil engineer, site planning, and so forth will take care of that as part of the design process. They'll plan in the sidewalks and the streets and so forth. And if your site is extra steep and you have to have a minimum cross slope and so forth, ADA has some fairly adaptable rules that allow you to build outside of the normal standards, and in my experience, it hasn't been any deal breaker or deal killer. ADA tends to work out fairly okay. Okay, we've covered a lot today in this episode number 4 on developing and what the feasibility process looks like. Hopefully you gained a little bit of information as we walked through each individual step. In the next video, episode 5, we're going to talk about final thoughts, summing it all up, wrapping it with a bow, and talking about how to take it into reality. putting a pro forma and a checklist and making sure you have everything dialed. If you're interested, subscribe below and we'll make sure and get that to your inbox. Comment below because we really do watch those, and this is exactly how this video came about. People were asking, we wanted to deliver. So comment below on your questions and thoughts and ideas. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.